Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a reading wrap up. I'm a little late with this wrap up because the books we're going to be covering are Q3, which I believe is July, August, and September. And we're already almost done with November, so we're a little delayed with talking about these, but that's fine. Every quarter that I've been doing these wrap-ups this year, I have been experimenting with the format that I use, and so today I've decided that I'm going to organize this by star ratings. I'm one of those that give me the good news first type of people, so we're actually going to be starting with 5 stars and then going all the way down to 1 star. As you can see from the title of this video, one of the worst books I've ever read is going to be in this wrap-up, so just buckle up and wait for that 1 star at the end, because it will be worth it. Sorry if the lighting keeps changing in this video. I always use auto white balance on my camera, and whenever I wear a white shirt I feel like I just look like Casper, so I've been like playing around with the brightness, and I don't know if we've landed on something better than I just did in the intro, but we're gonna have to just roll with it because I don't know how to use a camera. So in quarter 3 I only read 1 5-star book, which is pretty expected for me. I don't really give out 5 stars very easily, and this has to be one of my favorite books that I've read of all time. Like, I'm obsessed with it. I need everyone to pick it up if it sounds interesting to you. Like, I need you to read this. You probably already heard me talk about this, and that is The World Gives Way by Marissa Levian. I actually do have a copy of it, but I decorated my shelves for Christmas. Very cute, very cute. I don't really feel like you can see it in my filming setup. I don't really know how to light up my bookshelves, I'm being completely honest. Like I said earlier, I don't know how to work my camera, I don't know how to work lighting, I don't know what I'm doing, even though I've had a channel for so long. I am not an expert by any means, but I decorated my shelves for Christmas. Very, very cute. Got a lot of tinsel and strings and pom-poms and stuff. But that little penguin over there, he's sitting on my favorite book, so I cannot grab it for you, so we'll just put it on the screen as you can see. So I read this book for a blind date with a book concept that I did. I had gone to a bookstore in New York and I had picked this up randomly based on some prompts from the bookseller, and then I was inspired to do a vlog where I read a couple of books that were blind dates, and this book was such a delightful surprise. I loved it so much. So this book takes place in the future after Earth has ended. Basically, when the world was going to shit, all the rich people were thinking to themselves, I don't really want to die. What should we do? So they hired a bunch of scientists to make a giant spaceship for them to take off in, so it could go to a faraway planet that would take 200 years to get to, that would be habitable for them in the future. And so they think to themselves, okay, so a couple of our generations are going to be on the spaceship as we're traveling to the new world that we're all going to live on. What could we do in the meantime when it comes to like our laundry and living and breathing, because we're rich and we don't do those things for ourselves? Like, what could we do? So they have a great idea. They're like, well, the poorest don't really want to die on Earth either, so what if we gave them the option of being contract workers, which is basically like modern day slavery, where they are allowed to go on the ship for free. They don't even need to buy a ticket, but then they basically are indentured servants for like all of time, and they will not get their freedom until they get to this new planet. This spaceship is literally the size of Switzerland, like that is written into the book, and in between every single chapter of our main characters, we are given exposition on how this ship came to be, what is it like what are the different zones and different like countries in it. Like, it's very interesting, and it's literally like a mini world like on a spaceship. Hopefully I'm making sense. I feel like every time I talk about this book, I get very wrapped up in explaining how this all works, and then I'm like, am I even making sense? I don't know if I am. Anyway, our main character is a girl named Mira, who is a contract worker. She was born into this. She's had many different jobs, and at the start of the book, she's working for a couple, and she lives in their home and basically cleans after them, takes care of their baby. She basically just does anything that they want her to do, and she is just kind of like their servant girl, and obviously she doesn't get paid for this. And she's kind of like done with being a contract worker. She wants out, and at the very start of the book, the couple is killed, and so she has an opportunity to run away. So she grabs their baby because she like feels like she can't just like leave a little infant behind, so she grabs their baby and just like takes off. And then our other main character is a detective named Tobias, and so he is searching for Mira because they think that she had something to do with the couple being dead. And so it's just sort of like this cat and mouse chase across the ship, and like I said, in between their chapters we're getting a lot of like exposition and explanation of like how this ship is. Like, every time they're in a section of the ship, we get sort of a background on like how the scientists made it and why it is the way it is, and what the history is from like when everyone first moved into on this ship. If you counted how many times I said ship in this, please don't tell me, because it's probably too much. There is this examination of like the rich versus the poor, like class, all that sort of stuff, and it's so good. I feel like I never do it justice when I talk about it. Hopefully my excitement on how much I loved it could make you want to pick it up. The writing is so exquisite. It's so good. Like I said, I don't give out 5 stars very often, but I did give this book 5 stars, and it was it. it was it. You should pick it up. Next, we're gonna move on to my 4-star books, and first of these we have Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. This is an audiobook I picked up very randomly on Scribd. I was just looking for something to read and I saw some thrillers and I liked the cover of this. I don't really even know why I liked the cover because it's literally just like a lady's face. It's nothing really that special, but I just thought I'm gonna read that. Secrets, I like secrets. So in this book, we have our main character. I do not remember her name. And she, at the very start, is in Seattle. She's at Pike Place Market, which, for those of you who don't know, is this big market in Seattle where it's very busy. There's a lot of different shops in it. Like, it would be very easy to, like, get lost among everything in there. It's very loud. They're, like, selling fish there. It's the whole thing. Like, if you've ever looked up Seattle, this is one of the most famous places that you can go in Seattle. So at the very start of the book, she's in this market, and she has her little boy with her, who I believe is, like, 2 or 3 years old. And he keeps asking her for a lollipop, and she's just really stressed out because she's trying to do Christmas shopping. And she lets go of his hand for 1 second to answer her cell phone when her husband calls her, and next thing she knows, she looks down and her little boy is missing. So flash forward about a year, and our main character is just not getting by very well in life. She's completely devastated by the loss of her son. She is going to, like, grief counseling. She's in group therapy. She's doing a lot of things, but she still doesn't feel better. She doesn't feel like herself, and because of this, her marriage is really suffering. And so along the way, she did hire a PI to try to find her son, and her PI basically comes to her and is like, hey, I didn't find your son, but I did find evidence that your husband is having an affair. And this makes our main character just, like, lose her mind. She's like, you're telling me I lost my son and now I'm gonna lose my husband too? Like, at this point, I don't even know if she, like, really likes her husband all that much, but she's just like, no, that is not it. So she kind of sets off on this journey of trying to catch her husband and what he's doing, and it's like this whole web of things that she's doing. There's just lots of secrets on every single side, and all along the way, she's also trying to figure out still what happened to her son. And so it's a very interesting mystery for me because I tend to read a lot of thrillers that have to do with actual, like, murder, but this is more like a missing person case. So it was very intriguing, and then there's a lot of interesting perspectives between the husband, our main character, and then also the girl that he's having an affair with. It kind of, like, pivots between all their perspectives. I really liked this. I really liked the twists in it. I thought it was just a really good, fun little thriller. I read it in, like, 1 day, and it kept my attention, and I liked the writing, and I definitely want to read more from Jennifer Hillier because I know that she has more in her backlog. And so I don't know, I just liked it. It was, like, fun. Okay, missing children are not fun, but I had fun reading it, like the experience of trying to figure out what was going on. And I totally called some of the twists, but I still liked them even though I predicted them. I actually feel like I'm pretty good at predicting, like, where things are going, like who did what. So kudos to me, but I still liked it. The next 2 books that I rated 4 stars are actually the first 2 books in a series, and that is Clean Sweep and then Sweep for Peace by Lona Andrews. I always forget the titles of these books because they're kind of like puns with the word sweep, but I believe they both come from the Innkeeper series, Innkeeper Chronicles, something like that. So this series actually is mostly a sci-fi series. I feel like it gets classified under sci-fi fantasy, but I would say that it leans more sci-fi, even though there are some paranormal, like, creatures in it. Our main character is an innkeeper, and so essentially she has an inn on Earth, but it is specifically for guests from other planets. So it's sort of like an interplanetary, like, way station. And so if you are any sort of alien species and you need to come to Earth for any reason, you get to stay at her inn. And so her inn is specifically in Texas, and she has basically, like, magic powers where she's able to, like, control the inn and, like, create rooms for her guests depending on, like, what their species is and, like, what they're interested in. And so something interesting, like I was saying, is that there are paranormal creatures. So werewolves and vampires and different things like that do exist, but they are technically considered aliens. And so instead of it being, like, paranormal on Earth, like mystical, magical, it's like they literally came from other planets, and then they have all the different trademarks of being those species. Hopefully I'm making sense. But basically our main character just is trying to run her in, and all these different guests come all through the books. I can't really remember the plot of the first book. I think there's, like, something that is haunting her neighborhood, killing people or animals or something, and then she has to team up with this, like, werewolf guy to fix it. I don't really remember. I remember the plot of the second and third book a little bit more. The second book centers on the fact that there are a couple of different species that need to come to a resolution. Like, they're all at war with one another, and they're, like, fighting for resources on this, like, faraway planet. And so they need to have this sort of, like, summit, and so her inn gets chosen. I don't know. The magic system in this is very interesting because it's, like, science-based but magic-based. but sci-fi based all at the same time. Like, I don't really know. These first 2 books were pretty decent. I did end up reading the 3rd book as well. I will talk about that in the next category because I didn't like it quite as much as the first 2. I will say that at the time of reading them, I was way more into them than I am now. I don't know if I'll ever finish the series despite having read 3 books. They were just fine. They were fine. I liked them. Like I said, I gave them 4 stars to begin with. I think it's because I listened to the dramatized version of the audiobooks, so it was like full cast, like sound effects and different things, so it was very like high-paced and action filled, and so I think I liked that. But now that I've spent time away from the series, I'm just kind of like, it was fine. It was fine. I don't know. People have always told me that I should read Ilona Andros, so I wanted to try it because, like, I don't know, I just was in the mood, and I thought going into it, it was going to be more of a urban fantasy series, but then I found out very quickly it was sci-fi. But yeah, I don't know. It was good. It was good. It was fine. They were fine. They were good. The next book on this list is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a sapphic romance that is about a woman named Delilah who is a little bit jaded. She doesn't really believe in relationships. The book opens up with her waking up from a one-night stand, and she cannot remember the name of the girl that she just hooked up with, and she is super hungover, and she gets a phone call from her stepsister saying, when are you going to be showing up? You said that you would do the photography at my wedding. So she has to hop on a plane and go back to her small town that she grew up in that she absolutely hates because she feels like she never fit in. And so she's kind of thrust back into this life that always made her feel very lonely growing up. Her father died when she was really young, and she never really connected with her stepfamily. And so she has a lot of different issues, and she always tries to put up this facade of just like not caring about anything or anyone. And that's kind of why the book is called Delilah Green Doesn't Care. And so when she shows up, she meets one of the bridesmaids, and they sort of start a little bit of a romance, and it's very cute. The plot itself is not very earth-shattering. There's nothing about it that is particularly different from any other romance. I think what made this book very special is the sapphic aspect. Like, everything was just so soft and cute and nice. Like, I personally have not read that many sapphic books. I can probably count on one hand how many that I have read. I actually would really love to read more, so please let me know down below if you know of any that are really good. Another fun aspect of this book is that Delilah and the bridesmaids all decide together that they don't really like the fiance of her stepsister, and so they are kind of like ganging up together to try to get her stepsister to break up with him. So there's like some funny aspects in that as well. And like I was just saying, the romance between Delilah and Claire is just like so sweet, and everything about it was just like better than when it's hetero, you know what I mean? Next on my list is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I absolutely loved this book. This is, I believe, like the 3rd Grady Hendrix book that I've read, and it's definitely my favorite. So this book takes place in the 80s, and it follows these 2 best friends, Gretchen and Abby, and at the very start of the book, they go on a little bit of a girls trip at a lake house. Gretchen ends up going into the woods, and she goes missing for a little bit, and when she comes back, she's very different. And so for the rest of the book, Abby realizes that Gretchen is possessed by a demon, and so she does everything in her power to save her best friend. They have a really strong friendship, and what I love about this book is that it isn't really as horror as you would think, even though it does have to do with demonic possession. It is more about the power of friendship between Abby and Gretchen, and what's so special about it is it's just like such a beautiful commentary on women like being friends and being dedicated to one another, and it made me cry, it made me laugh. It was like a really good book overall, and it still scared me at points, not because it was like spooky per se. It was more like stressful because Abby was the only one that could tell that something was going on with Gretchen, and every time she tried to tell an adult or tell someone around her, it would always backfire, and the demon would like get back at her, and it was like very scary. I did recently watch the Amazon Prime adaptation of this, and I'm afraid I have to say, besties, it wasn't very good. I feel like everything that makes the book good, like the book is clever, it's powerful, it has a lot of feeling in it, and the connection between Gretchen and Abby is so evident and clear, and in the movie they just took all of that and just like threw it away. They just absolutely threw it away and tried to make just like a funny horror comedy. Like, I don't know, like the book is also a horror comedy, but it does it so much better than the movie. I would give the movie like a solid 2 out of 5 versus this being a 4 out of 5. Like, this is so much better. Like, if you were going to choose between the two, I would definitely say read the book, don't watch the movie. The next book on my list is Tinfoil Butterfly. This is a book I read, I believe, for a video where I read the lowest rated books on my TBR, and I really liked this. I was really shocked by how much I liked it because it's a very weird book. So in this book, we're following a girl, I believe her name is Emma. At the very start of the book, she is hitchhiking, and the guy she's driving with is bad news. And so she ends up getting him out of the car, and she steals his car. And then as she's driving along the highway, she ends up breaking breaking down in a ghost town. And so when she gets out of her car, she goes into an abandoned diner and she finds a little boy there with a tinfoil butterfly mask. And he keeps telling her that there's this man George that's evil that she needs to like help him with. And so she has to kind of get to the bottom and like find out like where this kid came from, what's going on with this ghost town. And then there's also the guy that she like stole his car. So there's a lot of different aspects and things moving throughout this story. What makes this book kind of odd is that Emma is telling this in, I believe, first person, and she is telling it to us in a very like aloof way. Like she's telling us explicitly what's going on right now like in the ghost town as she's running around with this little boy, but she's being very mysterious about why she is here. Like, why was she hitchhiking? Like, how did she get here? She also has some like wounds in her side because she recently was in the hospital and you don't know why she was in the hospital. And she slowly but surely is kind of like letting you know details about like her family and how she got here. And so it's very poetic the way that it's written, and I don't know, I just loved the writing style. I loved the vibes. I'm typically not a vibes girl. I'm typically like, give me the plot straightforward, but I thought it was written so well and I really liked it. I don't really know what else to say about this book besides if you want a kind of like psychological like moment thriller vibe, then this will be the good book. And if you like kind of like slowly getting the information, also very suspenseful, like very suspenseful, like when they're running around trying to get away from this guy George. Very scary, very interesting. The next 4-star book on my list is Lotus by Jennifer Hartman. This is a book that Riley Marie actually chose for me in the video I did where she selected my TBR for the week. This is a dark romance about a boy named Oliver who gets kidnapped when he is, I believe, like 5 or 6 years old, and now about 20-ish years later he's been released and he has to return to his life. His childhood best friend lives next door, and so together they sort of like come together and like fall in love as he kind of gets used to being back in the real world. And it was just so cute. Like, it was very dark considering there was like child kidnapping in it, and there's some dark stuff that happens as they uncover the reasons why Oliver got kidnapped, but it was still a really cute romance because there is just this like childhood friendship between him and the girl. I can't remember her name, but basically they were like best friends when they were kids, and then he got kidnapped and she never really got over the fact that he'd gone missing because he meant a lot to her. And Oliver is just such a precious baby. He is a little angel. He is not very childlike in that like it's like weird vibes of them falling in love, because when he was in captivity he did read books and he kept himself like kind of up to date mentally, but he's still like inexperienced in life. And so there's kind of that aspect of like her teaching him things like how to kiss and like have sex and stuff. It's very adorable, very cute. I really liked it. I feel like I'm doing a bad job describing it. It sounds creepy. It's really not creepy, because all you need to know about Oliver is what makes him precious is that he has the mind of an adult, but because he was alone for so long, he's very trusting, he's very kind, he always tells the truth, he's very straightforward with the girl. Like, he's always like, I just love you and I like want to be with you. It's like, it's very cute. It's very cute. And there is a little bit of a mystery aspect because we are trying to figure out, why was Oliver kidnapped? Like, who kidnapped him? Like, why did this happen? And so I don't know, it was a good book. I really would recommend it. I'm very glad that Riley told me to read it because I think I really like Jennifer Hartman. I read one other book by her this year, Still Beating, and I really liked that too. And it was just a really solid 4-star book. The next 2 4-star books on my list are actually from a video that I decided to cancel. I, way back in February, had an idea to do a video where I was going to read the first time ever Goodreads Choice Award winners. And so I found a blog post where Goodreads like announced the awards like as a concept, and they were saying like which books won. And so I just thought it would be really funny to like read all these books from like 2009 and find out if they're still good. And so I ended up reading all of them, but I only vlogged like half of it. And it just got to the point where I was getting so out of date with like having read these books. I still have the footage, but I just don't know if I'm ever gonna post it. Like, I feel like it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, and I don't really know what I would call that video. And and now I'm going to talk about all the books. So the first book for that was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Seth Grahame-Smith. I believe this one in the like sci-fi or like fantasy category. I can't remember exactly which category, but I know it was one of those. And it actually was the runner-up because I believe the winner was something from a series, and I had a rule that if it was from a series, I would read the runner-up if they had it listed in the blog post. And so this is kind of a silly book. You might have seen the movie when it came out and heard of this book because, again, it was like from like 2009. But basically this guy took Pride and Prejudice and rewrote it. Like most of it is Jane Austen's writing, but then he put in all these random like zombie scenes, and I'm a friend. I really liked it. I really liked it, which is so funny because I went on Goodreads and I looked up reviews, and a lot of people were like, this is so stupid, I hate this. But for me, it was good because I already read all of Jane Austen's books. Like, I'm pointing because I have them right there. I read all of them earlier this year for that other video concept where I read all of Jane Austen's books, and I am a big Jane Austen fan, and I thought that the zombie aspect added a lot of fun to it. Like, Pride and Prejudice is a classic. We all love Mr. Darcy, and so to add in like zombie scenes, it kind of worked, honestly. Like Elizabeth, like Lizzie, she was like slaying some zombies, and it was really good, and I really liked it. But I just found it funny because when I looked up the reviews, a lot of people that I'm connected with on Goodreads were like, this is so bad, and I was like, am I stupid for liking this? I don't know, maybe I am. I kind of like zombies, and I love Pride and Prejudice, so how can you lose at that? So that was a 2009 book that got my stamp of approval. And then the next book was actually a nonfiction book. I don't typically read nonfiction, but I was doing it for the sake of this video, and that is Columbine by David Cullen. As one would think, this book was about Columbine, and it was quite long. It was a little boring at times, but it was still very interesting. That's why I'm giving it 4 stars. I don't really know that much about Columbine. Obviously, I know that it's one of the first big school shootings that we had in the United States, and I didn't really know all of the facts about it, but it was so fascinating to learn about it. Like, even though the book did drag a little bit because there was just like a lot of facts, a lot of different perspectives to follow because Columbine did affect so many different people, I feel like Dave Cullen did a really good job of really getting the whole story because he had written this also a decade after it had happened. Something that was very fascinating was that there was a lot of misreporting at the time, and all the motivations like of the killers and everything were very misled at the time in the 90s. I'm sure some of you have heard this before, but at the time people were blaming like violent video games and blaming them for being like loners. But it actually was very interesting to read this and find out that the 2 kids that went through with the school shooting actually were pretty well liked among their peers. This book is really hard to read. It's very sad, so I definitely wouldn't recommend picking it up if you're not really in the mood to read about a horrific school shooting, but it was very interesting to find out the history of this, and it was specifically very sad because there was quite a few times when an adult could have found out what the guys were planning. Like, there was more than one opportunity for someone to do something about it. Like, there was a few times the police were notified about one of the guys like being a little bit threatening to a classmate, and you know, the kids were showing some like anger problems and different things at home, and so definitely if the parents had just like searched their rooms or like found their diaries, they would have been able to stop this. Obviously not victim blaming the parents, like that's actually like horrific that that happened, and also this was like before school shootings were as prevalent as they are now, so I don't really blame the parents, but it's just interesting to find out that there were so many times when someone could have done something. I actually feel like I blame the police the most in this because I don't want to get into all the details, but there was basically a couple of opportunities where the police had been notified that one of the boys was like doing something, and they just like always were like, haha, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was a sad book, but it was interesting, and I definitely would have never read it if it hadn't been for that video concept, even though I canceled the video. So moving on to the 3-star category, we have 4 books. First on this list, we have The Last Song by Nicholas Sparks. This is another book that I read for the canceled Goodreads video. As one might think, Nicholas Sparks was quite popular in 2009, so he did win a Goodreads Choice Award. What was funny about 2009 is that this was the first year that they did the awards, and this category that Nicholas Sparks won in was actually like chick lit, which is kind of funny because I don't feel like that's a category that we would have today. So it makes sense for 2009 for chick lit to be like a term we were using, and it also makes sense that Nicholas Sparks would win it. So if you have not seen the iconic Miley Cyrus film adaptation of this, I know it's iconic because I actually did rewatch it in the vlog footage. I feel like the more I talk about this video, the more you guys are going to be like, you should post it, but I'm literally telling you all my thoughts right now in this wrap up, so it's like literally not worth it. So in this book, we're following our main character Ronnie, who I believe is like 17 years old, and she has a very strained relationship with her father because a few years ago her parents got divorced due to infidelity, and her father ended up moving away from New York City to South Carolina, and since then they just have been very distant. And so this is, I believe, the summer before she's graduating, or she just graduated. I don't really fully remember like what the timeline is, but she's about to go to college in some way, and so her mother makes her go to South Carolina to spend the summer with her dad, and her little brother comes along as well. And so her little brother immediately is just like, yes, dad, I love him, like I've never had any attitude towards him. But Ronnie is just like not having it. She's very rebellious. In New York City, she has been acting out a lot. She's been shoplifting, she's been, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowd, and her mother just like doesn't know what to do with her. And so basically this is kind of like a last-ditch attempt to kind of get her her in order and also just get her to be closer to her dad. And so then she spends the whole summer with him, and at the start, obviously she does not want to be close to her dad, and then slowly but surely, like, their relationship gets better and better, and it's like this cute little thing. There's this thing with like sea turtles, like if you've seen the movie, you know. But basically Ronnie bonds with her dad like while like saving sea turtles and her brother, and they're all like having a fun time. And then along the way she meets this guy and they fall in love, and if you've seen the film, that is Liam Neeson. And as you know, in real life, Miley Cyrus and Liam Neeson fell in love on the set of this movie. But the book is pretty much very similar to the film if you've seen the film. I will say that the book weirdly had some more religious overtones that the movie did not have. Like there was a very important like pastor aspect and like this whole like church thing that was just very overstated in the book, and it was a little bit more subtle in the movie. And I'm gonna be upfront, I gave this book 3 stars. It really wasn't that bad. Like I read it from start to finish, and it wasn't like amazing. Like Nicholas Sparks is not gonna like win a Pulitzer in my eyes, but I could see why people like him. Like not for me, it's quite vanilla, it's quite kind of like basic, but I kind of see why his books get made into movies. And something that I realized when I was looking into this book is that he actually wrote this book for Miley Cyrus, because Miley said that she wanted to be in a Nicholas Sparks movie, and he had been wanting to write a story about a teenager because he'd mostly been writing about adults up to that point. And so this book was actually written with a movie in mind. So I feel like it's very interesting to read it with that perspective, because you can definitely tell that it feels like it's going to get like filled in by a film, if that makes any sense. But yeah, nothing really to write home about. It's just like a book and it's fine. And I would have never read it if it hadn't been for this canceled video concept, but I read it and I gave it 3 stars and it was fine. The next book on my list is The Devil of Nanking by Mo Hader. This was a hard book to rate because I feel like my rating for this kind of lies between 2 or 3 stars, but at the same time it was interesting, so I think that's why I bumped it up to 3, but I didn't really like it despite it being very well liked by other people. What I will say about this book is that it taught me a lot about the Nanking Massacre. I didn't know anything about the Nanking Massacre, like I'd never even heard of it, and so reading this book was very eye-opening because it was such a horrific atrocity that happened. So in this book we have our main character Gray, who's from the UK, and when she was a child she read a textbook that mentioned some lost film footage of a certain violent act that happened during the Nanking Massacre, and her whole life she has been very obsessed with finding this footage, and it has directly impacted everything that in her life up to this point. And so now she's in Japan trying to find the man who is connected to that film clip, like he was quoted knowing about it. So through this journey she ends up working as a cocktail waitress at one of those bars in Japan where like rich men come in, and then the women are like very like flirtatious and like talk to them a lot, but it's just like sort of like a comfort thing, not necessarily like sexual. And so through this she ends up meeting some like Japanese gangsters who like connected to all of this, and then the man that she's trying to get to like give her like the film clip is like works at a university. A lot happens from there. I can't really say because it would like spoil it, but basically all you need to know is that there is like this foreboding film clip that she's looking for. This whole time you're like, oh my god, what could be on that clip? And then you're learning a lot about the massacre because there's also some flashbacks back to when it actually happened, where you get a lot of the perspectives of like literally what went on. So for those of you who might be like me and you've never heard of the Nanking Massacre, basically what happened is in the 1930s Japan was invading China, and they were passing through the capital Nanking, and they just committed a bunch of really horrendous war crimes. There was just like a lot of violence against the civilians there that was like very graphic, and to this day there's not a lot of like photographic evidence or like film evidence of this happening. Like it was a very taboo thing. Like for a long time Japan actually didn't even acknowledge the fact that this had happened. I might be doing a really bad job explaining this. Like if you're a history buff you probably like know a better way to explain it, but that's basically what I got out of like reading about it outside of this book, because when this book kind of piqued my interest, so I read a little bit about what happened, and then also like I got some history from the book as well. And I do believe that Mo Hader did quite a bit of research when she was writing this book, but it's just like a really horrific thing that happened in history, and so Mo Hader kind of like uses it as the backdrop for her story. The book was fine. Like the actual story of like Gray like looking for this film clip ended up being very lackluster for me, because by the time we find out like what's on the film, like I wasn't really like into it at that point. The next book on my list is the 3rd book in that Innkeepers series that I was talking about earlier by Alona Andrews. This one is called One Fell Sweep. Like I said, I always forget the puns with the sweep in it. This one I believe had to do with the vampire aliens, and at the beginning the innkeeper hasn't seen her sister in like many years because she went off and like married a vampire like in space a while ago, and so at the very start of the book she gets a note from her sister saying that she needs help. So she goes to this like planet to like rescue her, and then she brings her sister back to the inn. Like I said earlier, I think at this point I was starting to lose interest in this series. Like I really liked it initially, but it's just not really like leaving a lasting imprint on my brain. And in this book, the main character innkeeper has a guy that she's like falling in love with, and I feel like their romance is so rushed. Like he was around in the first and second book, but it just like went from 0 to 60 like suddenly. In the third book they were like saying I love you, and it just like was not it. It was not it for me, and I didn't like it. So I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I think at this point I probably will not read more books in the series. Like it was fine, like it was a cute time. Like if you randomly came across these books at your library and they were available to be checked out and you were in the mood, you could read them and be entertained. But I don't think they would ever be anyone's favorite books of all time. And then the last 3-star book on this list is The Third Mrs. Durst by Anne Aguirre. This is another book that I read when I was doing the Reading the Lowest books on my TBR. And this is a thriller about a woman who is a model. She first grows up in poverty and then becomes a supermodel and is like living the high life. And then a rich man takes interest in her and decides that he wants to marry her. So she leaves modeling to go be his trophy wife. She quickly finds out that he had other wives before her that died mysteriously, and she thinks that she might be next. And so it's a story of revenge. It's a story of seduction. It's actually pretty good. I wouldn't give it 4 stars just because the writing and like the ending was like kind of rushed, but overall it was an entertaining read. I think this is similar to the last book, where if it was at your library and you had an opportunity to read it and you were bored and didn't have anything else to read, I think you could read this and have a good time, but I wouldn't necessarily like recommend it with my full chest. Like it's very 3 stars for me. Moving on to the 2-star category, we have 4 books again. The first of these is Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld. This is another book that I read for that canceled Goodreads video. I believe this won the sci-fi category in 2009, which I found very interesting because it is young adult. I noticed in 2009 there were a lot of young adult books peppered like throughout the whole list, and I thought that was interesting because I feel like 2009, 2010 was kind of like the dawn of like YA becoming as big as it is now. Like that was kind of like back in like the Hunger Games era as well. And so it doesn't surprise me that this is on that list, but now in like modern like Goodreads Choice Awards, they separate YA. So it was very interesting to see that there. But basically this is a World War II retelling that has a steampunk aspect, and we follow a couple of different main characters. One of our main characters is a prince, and it's sort of implied that he is the son of the Archduke that gets murdered. Maybe it's a World War I retelling. I don't know. I don't really remember my history. But anyway, his dad is an Archduke and he gets murdered, and that sort of like sets off the war. It must be World War I, because is that not World War I? I don't think that was World War II. I feel like I'm talking about a lot of history in this video. We got Columbine, we got Nanking, and then we got World War I apparently. So please don't quote me on anything I say in this video. And then the other character is a girl who wants to be an airman. Like she's very obsessed like being in the military, and so she is posing as a boy. So eventually the paths of these 2 characters cross because, like I said, the Austrian prince is like running, and then she is on an airship that ends up crashing, and so then they end up like crossing paths, and he's trying to hide his identity, and then she's also hiding her identity. It took me a very long time to read it. Like I think I started it in like literally like March, and I was so bored that I had to stop halfway through and then like pick it back up later. And I don't know if it is this book in particular or if it's because it's young adult, because I don't really like young adult anymore, and I didn't really like the writing, which could be Scott Westerfeld's fault. But then there was also the aspect of me not really liking the historical fiction or the steampunk. So overall, I don't think I liked this book even a little bit. The next book on this list is a major disappointment because I wanted to like it so bad, and that is Fool Me Once by Ashley Winstead. For those of you who might know, Ashley Winstead is one of my favorite authors because of the thriller books that she's been releasing. Her book last year, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and then this year she wrote The Last Housewife. They were both superb, like so good as thrillers, and weirdly she also released a romance this year, and so I was like, I'm gonna read that because I love my girl Ashley Winstead. But unfortunately, her writing style in romance is not like her thriller writing style at all. She still has a fascination with unlikable characters, but it doesn't work as much in a romantic comedy. This is a second chance romance about a girl who works in politics. She specifically works doing like PR and marketing for this clean energy company, and she's trying to get a bill passed in Texas. And so she comes across her ex-boyfriend from college who also works in politics. Like he works specifically like for a governor in Texas. And so they have to work together on this bill. And the catch is that the reason that they broke up back in the day is because she cheated on him. And so there's a lot of like bad blood between them. And so there's a weird like competitive vibe as they're working on this bill. I don't know what it is about Ashley Winstead, but she loves cheating. Like every single book I've read by her, which is 3, like I said, has cheating in it in some way, shape, or form. And I think in the thrillers it works because they're meant to be dark and like fucked up, but in a romance that's not really a trope that I personally enjoy. The message of this book is sort of like you should forgive someone for cheating because they made a mistake. It was very weird versus like in the thrillers that I read from her where someone cheats, it's like, oh, they're a bad person, and that's just like they're supposed to be bad, like they're supposed to be like a morally great character. But the girl in this book, we were supposed to just be like, oh, she's just like has trouble like expressing her feelings. And at no point in this book does she ever see a therapist, and I feel like she really needed to go see a therapist because her behavior makes no sense. Like there's like all these scenes where like she gets really like wildly drunk or like does drugs because she just wants to have fun and like forget responsibility. She likes being like a party girl and like not focusing on the real stuff. And so besides her like day job, she doesn't really take anything else in her life very seriously. And I don't know, it just was giving like, girl, like I need you to get on Psychology Today and find a therapist. Like I will get on there and like look at like what is your health insurance, like I'll find out what your copay is, like I'll do it for you. Like I don't know. And I felt like the guy ended up having to be like her punching bag a lot in her journey to like figure out her issues. And so ultimately like this book just really didn't work for me because of the characters. Next up we have Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This is another book that I read for the lowest rated books on my TBR, and I can kind of see why this has mixed reviews on Goodreads. It's a very odd book. It's about this gay couple that rents a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and they have an adoptive daughter who stumbles upon this guy in the woods named Leonard. And so basically he says that he is her friend, and he kind of is like befriending the little girl at the beginning of the book, and it's kind of like eerie. And then a bunch of other people show up, and then they break into the cabin and they tell the gay couple that they have to make a choice of like killing someone in their family or the world is gonna end. And so then the rest of the book is just them having this conversation about whether or not they're going to believe these crazy people that broke into the cabin about whether the world is ending or not. And it's just literally a conversation the whole book. Like the suspense of this is just like, what are they gonna do? And they just talk the whole book, and then a couple of people die along the way. They are releasing an adaptation soon. I think M. Night Shyamalan is directing it, I believe. So that might be an interesting film adaptation, but the book was not it. I did not really like it. I found it quite boring. And then lastly, for 2 stars, we have Pretty Baby by Mary Kubica. This is another book that I read for that blind date with a book concept when I got all like the wrapped books. This is a thriller about a woman who works in a nonprofit. She's a very charitable person, and one day she's at the train station and she sees this young girl with a baby who looks homeless, and so she decides to take her into her home despite her husband and her daughter not really being a fan of this plan. And so the POVs of the book kind of go between the woman, the husband, and then the young girl that gets brought in like into her home. And so there's a lot of like secrets being like kept among all these different characters. Our book is kind of boring, honestly. Like if I hadn't been reading it for a video, I probably would have DNF'd it. I've already gotten rid of my copy that I got from that blind date with a book box thing. It was fine. Like I've always wanted to read Mary Kubica, but I don't think this is the right book to start with. I will say that her writing style is pretty good. Like I actually liked how she was like characterizing all these people. I just think that the thriller aspect was missing a lot. Like it didn't really have like a what the fuck aspect, and the twists like weren't very big. So I feel like if you went into this like expecting like a normal thriller, you'd be a little bit disappointed because it is quite slow. And that brings us to the thing that we've all been waiting for, the 1-star category, the worst book that I read so far this year, the book that makes me angry every time I think about it. The book is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. Anybody who's liked this book, why did you like it? Because I didn't like it. I found it quite problematic, And I also found the writing to be horrendous. So in this book, we have a girl who is struggling with her reproductive system. Like, she has really bad cramps, her periods are horrible, and she's about to get a hysterectomy just to like fix all of her womanly issues. I believe she might have PCOS. I can't really remember if that's exactly what she had, but she has problems and it's not good. Like, you know, being a woman like that can be hard. And so at the start of the book, she's dating this guy that's in the military and he's far off. And the reason she likes dating him is because he doesn't want to have kids and he's always like off on deployment and he's coming home soon, but she's really like not looking forward to him coming home and she can't figure out why. And then her best friend is getting married and her fiance's best man is a guy that she's never met before. And so she meets him at the start of the book and they instantly have chemistry. They're like, oh my God, but she has a boyfriend. Weird cheating vibes, just so you know. But anyway, so they start hanging out as friends, like just they're in the friend zone. But the thing about him is that he really wants to have kids. Like, he goes out of his way numerous times to be like, I want to have like 10 kids. There's even a point in the book where the main character is like, oh, would you ever adopt kids, like in replacement of, you know, wanting to have so many kids? And he's like, no, I want to have them biologically. Like, I want to have like a football team of kids. Like, I just want to pop them out. Like, I just like love the heteronormative like children, love it. And so it just keeps getting drilled in that they can't be together because the main character can't have kids. And she doesn't want to tell him her problems because she finds it embarrassing, I guess. And so she kind of hides behind the fact that she has a boyfriend as why they like can't be together, blah, blah, blah. She ends up breaking up with her boyfriend and then they start having sex, but it's like no strings attached. And she basically keeps lying to him the whole book and being like, no, I don't want a relationship. This is just about sex. Like, I don't care about you. Like, I don't like you like that. Like, I just want to have sex, blah, blah, blah. But she won't just like come out and tell him like what her problems are. I know I'm like basically spoiling this book, but it's because I think this book is so bad. If you want to hear like excerpts from this, you can actually watch that blind date video because I did read a lot of different things from it. One thing that the guy character always does in his perspective is he refers to the girl, I remember her name is Kristen, so he's always like, Kristen's like a unicorn, she's not like other girls, and he always like puts down other women to compliment her, and she's described as being like this like really petite little like Latina girl that's like so sexy with her like luscious hair, and she's so perfect and cool because she likes to drink beer and hang out and like go to cookouts, and like she's cool with like hunting and stuff. So that makes her just like such a cool girl. And so the main guy just refers to her like that constantly. And then in her perspective, she is a little bit misogynistic as well towards other women. And then also the boyfriend that she has, like the guy that's deployed, she's so disrespectful to him because she like keeps hanging out with this guy and like doing different things with him. Like, they give each other like foot massages and they hang out all hours of the day. And she literally has a boyfriend. Like, if my partner told me they were doing that with another person, I would literally break up with them. I would be so upset. By the time they break up, she's just like so callous and like doesn't care about her like existing boyfriend at all. And then something that she does too is she is kind of like homophobic because he has some things about him that she finds effeminate. Like, he likes to go to the opera, he likes to go to the theater, like he likes wine, he likes to go to fancy restaurants. And so she's like, oh yeah, when I first met you I thought you were gay. And it's just like weird vibes. Like, who would say that? I think this book was written in like 2019. Like, what? But basically the thing that made me the most irate is that this whole book is supposed to be representation of this woman who like can't have kids. And throughout the whole book, she's super disrespectful about it because she always ties her womanhood to it, which is like kind of like, okay, like those are her feelings. Like, I guess I don't want to invalidate the way she feels. I'm sure women who suffer with this like feel like this, but she keeps being like, I'm not a real woman because I can't have kids, blah, blah, blah. And so she like convinces herself that she doesn't even want them anyway. But another thing is she fat shames herself a lot because she gets very bloated because of her like cysts and stuff. And so just like her in her abdomen area, she always has a little bit of a tummy. And so there's like this scene when her and the guy have sex for the first time, and basically she's very embarrassed by her stomach. So later she's telling her best friend about it, and she's like, oh, I had to tell him that my stomach was bloated because I was afraid he was gonna think he was fucking a pregnant woman. And I was like, oh girl, why so, what? Like, why would you write that? This bitch gets pregnant at the end of the book because they keep having sex without condoms because she's like, oh, I can't get pregnant because of my infertility issues. So then she gets pregnant and has a miracle baby at the end of the book. And I'm like, if anyone went into this being like, oh my God, amazing rep for me as someone who struggles with like infertility and like I never get to read about periods and different things in romance books, like this is so great. The author is literally like, what if I took all that representation and just threw it out the window and made you feel like everything I was saying about fertility being tied to womanhood, just make it real for you. If you want to hear more about my thoughts and more of me ranting about this book, I highly recommend you watch that blind date video, because that book just literally made me want to jump off a cliff. Like, I absolutely hated it. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this wrap up. Let me know down below what you thought of this format. I've been trying out a lot of different concepts. Let me know which concept has been your favorite so far for how I format these wrap up videos. I have an interesting idea for next quarter, not this Q4, but like Q1 of next year. I have an interesting concept that I'm going to try. But if you have anything that you want me to revisit or do this quarter, let me know and I will do it. But other than that, that brings me to the end of this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think of these books. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.